Hello, and welcome to another episode of Mews R&D podcast. Today with Diego Nuñez, Director of DesignOps at Mews. Right, welcome, Diego.
Thanks
for coming over.
Thanks, Jan. It's a pleasure. Thanks, man.
I always give some gift to people to reflect their hobbies or something because I always do a thorough back check on the people. So this time we have a check APA. So why do you like APAs? Do you like APAs?
I love them. I love them. I mean, any pale ale, like American pale ale, Indian pale ale, imperial pale ale. I love them. I think it's the hops. It's the hops that I love. It's that flavor it gives. So,
do you produce your own?
I did in the past. Yeah, I brewed for some time. When I used to live in London, I brewed for a bit, but not any longer.
Was it during COVID times? Or
no, that was a long time ago. It was about 10 years ago.
Because I know during COVID, I think everybody had a home brewery.
Yeah, I had a little kid at the home, so that kept me busy.
By the way, there was a home brewery at Mews office in the garage for a brief while, but I don't think it's continuing anymore. So, when I was thinking about how to open this interview, I always think about developers being angry when somebody asks them to fix their printer, or, their mom to help them with the computer.
Right.
So is it similar to when somebody asks you to design them a nice logo?
It's usually, it gets funny when they ask you to design a nice deck, a nice PowerPoint deck. And it's like, the first question is like, why PowerPoint? The second one is like, why do you need a deck? And the third one is, why can't you do it yourself? Mm-hmm. But it is very similar to that feeling developers have, yeah.
But I think you proved this right because I just saw your deck and it's beautiful.
Thank you.
And I know you did it in Figma Slides, right?
Yes.
So how do you like Figma Slides?
Well, that's new to me, to be honest. I hadn't worked with Figma Slides in the past. I was used to Keynote mostly, not so much PowerPoint. I think it works good. I mean, it's super flexible. You can do a lot of things with it. I think once you get used to it, it works really well. I mean, I obviously loved how collaborative it is, and like real time, you can leave comments and people can edit and do like a real teamwork with it. So yeah, need to get used to it, I guess.
Not a sales pitch for Figma, by the way.
Not a sales pitch for Figma.
So I kind of touched it with my first question about design and designing pretty things. So what is actually design? Because I think many people can understand it differently. So what is it in your mind or in your world?
So design is a pretty big term, right? So we usually refer to design when it comes to problem solving. So it is about how do your products or services solve your users' problems, right? So that's then you articulate whatever interface. If it's a face-to-face conversation or if it's a digital product, then it's your digital interface. So it's about how do you solve or how do you add value to whatever the end users or the user's problem is. That's in a big sense what design is. To me, at least personally, it's always about function before form. Mm-hmm. You can't have one or the other. You both have to be in the equation, but it's about function, meaning you need to solve something, you need to do something, and form is the aesthetic, the visual, which is how design tends to be judged. But actually, design should be judged by its function. Is it really solving the problem, right? And then, you open like myriads of paths around what kind of design, product design, service design, research is a design function, how we do it at least, motion design, etc., etc.
So, and allow me to make another comparison between engineering and design. Maybe we'll have a lot of them during this podcast. I know that very often engineers tell me that the actual coding is very small fragment of their time. It's problem solving, it's discussing the topic, finding the bugs and thinking of the right creation. So can it be similar for designer that the doing of the pretty things that are seen is actually a smaller part of their work and most of it is actually the research, the work behind?
Yeah, very, very similar in that sense. So if you look at product design has an outcome, which is usually some screens and a Figma file. But that's just the outcome. That's the tip of the iceberg. Actually, what you've spent, 95% of your time is on figuring out how you need to design something. Not necessarily the what, because the what is that conversation with the product manager. So it's not a pure design decision, but the how do you make sure you're delivering the value you're intending to deliver? That is that 95% of your time. It's about identifying what's the problem you need to solve. It's about how do you also come up with an innovative way of solving it. So not just, coming up with a best practice exactly by the book, but how can we bring in that little excitement as well in the day-to-day of our user? So that's really where the time of a designer should be invested in.
Could you draw me, let's say, a typical org chart of a mature design? What roles should be in the design team? Or, Of course, in Mews, it's more across the teams. It's very collaborative between engineers and product managers. But what are the roles? And maybe just one sentence to each what they do. Right. Because I know things like UX research, service designers, etc.
Yeah. So, there's, product designers. That's probably, obviously being, digital products and services. That's the core of our design team, or the majority, let's say, of our design team. Basically, what they do is they create a digital product. They craft the interface with which the user will be interacting, right? That's the product designer. The UX researcher, what they do is basically they understand what's the problem, what's the pain, or what's the motivation that you need to be tapping into, what your design needs to tap into. We have a number of products who interact with a number of users. So we need to understand that this is a complex world. It's an ecosystem, right? So we've got something called service design or service designers who have a very transversal way of looking at things. They understand, the impact that whatever you do on reservations has on your food and beverage experience if you go to a restaurant, for example, or the opportunities that we might be missing whenever you're checking into a hotel, but really wanting to know what are those spaces or what are those events that could be happening in the hotel, for example. So it's the service designer who looks across products and across what we call tribes to actually bring value and make sure that we're organized in a way in which we serve different personas per division. So service designers as well help bring insight from one division to the other and make sure that we're not siloed by our own organization. That's the front end, let's say, or the front stage of design. But then we've got the backstage, which is, design operations, or what we're calling internally design experience, but also design system, right? Those are two strong pillars that we have. Obviously, design operations, it's internal design, it's internal service design. It's about understanding what do our designers need, how can we scale design, how can it be more efficient? How can it run faster? How can we take care of the well-being of our designers? So it's all that. And design system is about helping designers and engineers have a design system, have a set of assets, let's say, that are there to design and build as fast as possible, right? And obviously maintaining a consistent experience. So that's a bit of the map.
And speaking of UX researchers, you mentioned that they need to understand the business. They need to, understand the client. Should they be actually coming from hospitality, or how do you become a great UX researcher when you, let's say, shift across companies with different, businesses?
So, it's good that they have a sense of the business, or they understand hospitality, not necessarily business, for them then to translate what findings they gather from the user to recommendations for the product, right? So that's important to act as that hinge. If they were just understanding the user but not understanding about hospitality, they could be pretty naive. They could be superficial in their way of approaching the conversation and not really digging into certain parts of the product or of the processes that the user is running. If it was just someone who knew about hospitality, then they wouldn't be trying to understand what is driving the behavior of that user. Why is that user getting frustrated? What is the motivation behind what that user needs to do or wants to do, right? So it's that double knowledge that helps really understand what is it that you need to be solving, and make sure that those recommendations are actionable for those teams, designers, PMs, who are then making decisions on what is it that you need to be building and how.
And how much designers, maybe in general, let's say, should spend with the clients, and how much they should spend actually with the internal players like salespeople, customer onboarding, customer support, because I guess you can fix many things also internally from the design, right?
Right. Absolutely. Both are necessary. It's not either or. Both need to be there. If you just rely on internal functions, on your sales reps, on your GTM team, obviously they have really strong understanding of what user needs or what customers needs. Actually, what customers demand, not necessarily what they need, which is a different conversation. And obviously, it's a biased knowledge that they have. So that is good. That is necessary. We need to be tapping into that knowledge and understanding what are the tickets that are being risen by the support team. What are the topics that customers are complaining about? What is the sentiment that they have when doing that? But we can't leave aside the fact of going to understand the users. Really getting to understand what a front desk agent is needing at a certain point, what a revenue manager is needing at a certain point, a GM, whatever the role is, right? Because those two sources of knowledge, they are complementary, and one without the other is just trying to just look through one eye, right? You're not going to see the depth of the conversation.
So let's throw in engineers and product managers into the mix, because now we're talking about UX research, designers in general, how they should be speaking with the clients. So how should these three collaborate together to get the best outcomes?
Right. So it's a team, right? PMs, engineers, and designers need to work as a team, as they do. It's like in teamwork. What you focus on is on your strengths. If you try to level everyone on the same topics, you'll just lag behind. What we need to make sure is that we tap into the strengths of each side of the triangle. And in a way, you don't ask Mbappé to defend, you ask him to score goals, right? So you don't ask an engineer to come and understand.
Reference, by the way.
I know you like a good sport reference. So that's what I intend to say, is that at the end of the day, each of the three has an important role. What needs to happen is that there's a healthy collaboration. So it's not one of the functions trying to override the other two. When that happens, there's two other functions who can compensate. But most of the times, you need to understand as well as a designer or as a PM or as an engineer, what is your strength and what is your role in that conversation? Is it maybe to give an input, but maybe the decision is not on your side? Or is it about really making the decision, and hence, they're leveraging your expertise and your strength? So it's really about making sure that those three legs of the stool really work together, have the same consistency, have the same say, have the same right to actually, confront ideas, really debate, because that's healthy. But again, it's about having a healthy collaboration.
I will not ask you who's the attacker in this trio, because I think I know what would be your answer. But let's go back to you as a person and where you came from, because you are working in the back office of the design, which is not very. I guess it's not what you dreamt when you were a kid to become a director of design operations.
No.
So where did you start with your professional background? Are you a software engineer? Are you designer by trade?
I'm actually business administrator by trade. I started marketing back in the day, and then I studied service design to actually move into the design world. But I actually started working on Formula One, on Renault Formula One. I worked in the commercial launch of the Formula One team in Spain. I'm talking, 21 years ago.
Alonso time?
Even before Alonso time. Alonso was in Minardi back then. So it was about preparing the F1, the Renault F1 launch, which would be happening next year because he was still on a different team. So yeah, that's how I, got into it.
Were you a Formula One fan, or it was a coincidence?
At all. Formula One, I'm from Spain. Formula One didn't exist. He was the first Formula One driver that Spain really the first one actually. So it was a sport which I didn't understand. I had no clue about. Whenever I spoke with someone about it, they had no clue about it. So it was tough because back then my role was to actually convince the garages who had Renault, so the Renault garages, to actually sell the merchandising from Formula One. So this is a year ahead. So before they knew who Fernando Alonso was, before they knew what Formula One was, I needed to liaise with a communications agency to, understand how to deploy the brand in Spain. They had no clue because they didn't understand Formula One. They didn't understand the audience. The audience didn't exist in Spain. It was very, very marginal. So it was interesting in the sense of really getting to understand the brand, really getting to understand design from a very practical point of view, but also getting to understand the motivations of people and in this case of garages on, how can Formula One be a driver for them, a business driver for them, because it was an additional revenue stream that they would be generating. So yeah, that's how I started. And from then, that kind of took me from step to step. I understood that I was really lacking that understanding of users and that really capacity to, go deep into what was the motivation or how could I be helping my user. So I moved into actually market research, like classic market research. Then I realized that market research was, from my point of view, knowledge generation, but what do I do with that knowledge? I'm an action person, so what do I actually do with that? So I moved into innovation consulting. That's where I started applying, let's say, all the knowledge, all the insight that was gathered through research, but also bringing in that design lens, that design lens that was about, working really closely with service designers, working really closely with product designers, with business designers. And from then that kind of took me on the route that I walked in.
You mentioned market research. Is there any difference? And if so, what is the difference between UX research and market research?
There is a difference. So usually market research works on customers or the market, let's say, whilst UX research works on users. So your customer is Hotel X, right? So they can understand, what are the buying drivers of that hotel? What is the segmentation of that hotel? Where does it lie within the overall market? What could be their needs in terms of the typology of hotel? User research has to do with how the users, so those are the people in different roles, again, the front desk agent, the revenue manager,
even the client, right?
The housekeeper, in the client, in the customer, exactly. Those users who interact with your products, what are their needs when interacting with your products? So that's the difference. One is about the market, the industry. The other one is about within that market, go deep into a customer and understand those users within the customer.
So then there was some time. I know your last gig before Mews was a bank, if I am not mistaken.
I did some time at a bank. That's right.
Nice. So how did you end up in Mews?
So I was working in consulting, but classical kind of being embedded in clients. I was running a design studio in Spain, and part-time I was acting as initially head of design and then DesignOps. Responsible within the French bank. I knew a number of people who were working at Mews. I found out pretty randomly about this position. I had spoken with those individuals, with some of the service designers in our team. So with Sofia Santos, with Marina Rico, they were service design members in the team. And from the outside, you just looked at the amazing kind of team that Mews was bringing together, right? Of design team that Mews was bringing together. And that was just like eye-opening. That was like, wow, this is the next big thing that's going on in design.
But you didn't know Mews if you were just...
I had no clue.
Yeah.
I had no clue. I'm not going to lie. I just started understanding about the organization and about the industry. I didn't know much about the industry, to be honest, through the people that I knew and through actually, obviously their LinkedIn activity, grabbing a drink with them, chatting about the organization. So really getting to understand the culture, getting to understand, the impact Mews wants to make in the industry. So it was all very, very appealing and very eye-opening.
Do you have any particular relationship with this industry?
So I mean, I've worked a little bit in travel in the past with bed banks, with hotel beds, but not much to be honest. And one of their businesses called Beds Online, but again, I'm talking 10 years ago, and it was like a UX research product to really get to understand the usability of the platform. So yeah, no. Apart from that, it wasn't like the core of my day to day, which I was more used to like banking and utilities, mostly banking, to be honest. When I say doing time in a bank, it's like doing time in prison. But
and apart from news, what is your what are the companies that you look at when you think of great design, great work that they produce?
So I mean, if this question can be answered like a couple of ways. I mean, classically, you'd say B2C companies, which we all interact with, which is probably, very appealing. So places like Spotify or places like Apple, right? Who are, super inspiring, super consistent in how they apply design and how they they want to make sure to really solve the user's problem and even execute in a super consistent and super exciting manner. But if you look at it, we're a B2B industry mainly, right? We have our B2B2C products, etc., but we're mainly B2B. So B2B players like Atlassian, for example. Atlassian is super exciting. I mean, be it Jira, be it Trello, be it Atlas, whatever it is, Confluence, it's all super exciting. It's all really designed to solve specific problems and specific issues. Then, you can complain about the complexity of the products or are they or are they not really linked? But I really look up to Atlassian and especially from a DesignOps perspective on how they make sure that their products try to be an ecosystem, and whichever of those products you land on, they feel the same. I think that's a really key win that they have.
Now I'm going to have a very, let's say, maybe spicy question.
Okay.
I was asked to ask you, speed versus quality. Where are you?
Okay. I mean, as a designer, I would say quality. But in my current role, it needs to be a balance, right? You can't deliver something that's, something that people are not going to use and it's not going to solve a problem. That is quality.
And not going to sell it at the end.
And not going to sell it at the end, or even generate more issues with your customer because they could potentially get frustrated and churn. But if we don't do it fast enough, someone else will. Or on the contrary, if we don't do it fast enough, we're not going to be able to deliver value to a customer who's waiting for us to deliver that value, right? I mean, we are a contendant, we are a challenger in this industry. So we need to go fast to make sure that, we can bring customers on board who leave probably a higher functionality in terms of complexity from their former legacy supplier, but who can come to us with that commitment, let's say, of a roadmap of functional development. So, I mean, it sounds a little bit political, but it is, to be honest, a balance. So, but within that balance, I would tend to say quality, not before speed, but with a little bit more of weight.
Conscious of.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's about, when you release something into market, you have that one chance, right? Then sure, you can iterate, you can make it better in time, but you need to make sure that you're getting it right. So for me, it's making sure that whatever we're releasing is really hitting the nail, is really hitting that sweet spot of what is the problem, what is the user's pain, and how have you actually articulated the solution in a way that when the user uses it, they say like, oh, wow, was it that easy? So that's the aim.
I asked you where was your background from, and something I always think about is where do designers come from?
Okay.
I know it sounds funny, but is it mostly people who were, let's say, front-end engineers and they were into the pretty things, or is there like a wave of people who actually studied design?
Yeah.
What's the situation?
It's a bit generational, right? So to be honest, if you look at most of the designers, let's say on our team, they have gone through formal design studies. If you look at, maybe people who are a little bit older, they could be coming from an engineering background or both arts kind of background or marketing, just because let's say the formalization of the domain of the discipline wasn't there yet. Yeah, you had like graphic design or web design, but not necessarily applied to like digital industry as we have nowadays. I mean, I'd say it's again, it's not one of those things of saying who's a better designer. It's not that kind of a conversation. There are amazing designers with engineering backgrounds because they really understood that conversation about, where do you focus your efforts? Is it on the execution or is it really on understanding what's the problem that you need to solve and how you need to solve it before actually applying a UI to it? That's where engineers are amazing. Problem solving, right? You said it before. It's about what's the logic? What's the problematic? How do I need to solve it? How feasible is this going to be? How feasible is my design going to be? And what are the constraints or the restrictions upon which my design needs to deliver, right? That's a really important point, which, again, if we go back to that design, engineering, product, let's say 3 legs of a stool, if as a designer, you're designing completely blindfolded, and you don't know what's the tech stack with which it's going to be built, how can you know if that's feasible or not? You're probably just, sticking a stick in a wheel and generating a problem down the line. So it's if you look at, designers very back in the day, when graphic design was a thing and it was like physical design, you needed to go to the print. You needed to understand how your design was getting printed. Was it working? Was the color being executed as you wanted it? What was the effect of the material? Was it a paper same as a paper next to it? Well, not. So you need to have that knowledge, right?
So now you actually made me think. So is it different, let's say that we use React and TypeScript, than if we used another technology on the front end? Is it really something that the designer has to have in mind when designing wireframe, let's say in Figma?
So I'd say it's probably more on the back end to understand what is it that you can do. Can you propose a functionality where you're pulling information from X source? Is that feasible? So obviously from a front end perspective, most things are feasible. It'll depend on the technology and how much effort you want to put into it, right? But it's mostly from a back-end perspective. Again, the example, do you want to link a specific screen to whatever happened in the reservation process? Well, does that information speak to each other or not?
Perfect segue to my next question, which was around designers working with data and with data engineers, data analysts. How should the relationship look like?
I'd say pretty close. It needs to be pretty close. Again, a designer who's not taking into account data, and data can be quantitative, but it can be qualitative as well, right? So if they're not taking into account data, they're just, being artists. We're not artists. We're designers. We need to live within constraints. We need to deliver business value, right? So we need to understand what we can do and what we can't do. And data is actually an inspiration or an information source. It shouldn't either be just the unique source, right? Because then, if you just need to do what data says you need to do, you're just being a machine, right? Then what's the value of a designer? What's the intuition a designer can bring? What's the value of the triangulation of data? Okay, that's what the quant data, what the analytics is saying. This is what the customer is actually telling me. This is what the support team is actually responding to. So how do I triangulate those sources and figure out what I need to do?
When talking about data, how much should UX research use them, or how much should they cooperate together?
Yeah, good point. I think it's actually, so again, not to talk about the ideal scenario, but to be practical, right? I think right now we have at Mews an opportunity because we fall under the same team right now. We're under what we call platform enablement, right? So back some time ago, we had, the design team with the UX researchers, and there was like, a semi-transparent wall with other worlds. Now we're in the same division. So that makes us work together closer. UX researchers, in a way, they hold the qualitative nature of data, right? So the deep conversations, the motivations, the pains, that side of the equation. Data insights, they understand the metrics, they understand what is it that's actually moving the needle, right? So it's not either or. We need to make sure that those two sources of data really work well together. And actually what we've done is we have a data analyst and a UX researcher embedded within a tribe, right? So in the day-to-day, whatever the question or the challenge a PM or a designer has, they now don't have to go to one or go to the other. They work as a duo. They work as a pair, as a couple, right? So you go to them with a problem and they will figure out what's the right approach, what's the right answer. I think before we had this issue of like, okay, I might go to the UX researcher for everything, or I might go to the data analyst for everything. And then they have to start talking between them, start to look at what kind of data they can gather, what is it they can do on the platforms that we have. And that kind of, made the process go slower. And even lose a little bit of trust in the way. So I think now we have that opportunity to actually work together even better.
And when we stretch this cooperation outside of the R&D team, so let's say people in the onboarding, because that's one of the goals for us to really onboard as many hotels as possible. Do these people go to this duo as well, or where should these people go, and how this cooperation looks like?
That's a really good point. So service designers are working closely with deployment and onboarding. Some of our objectives are to deploy as not as many as we can, but as fast as we can as well, right? So service designers, they are orchestrators. They are experienced orchestrators. So they look at the overall journey and they will help make sure that onboarding process is shortened. But it's also set up for success because there's a potential, let's say, risk, which is, okay, you can shorten the onboarding process, but then you haven't explained how certain task needs to be done or how certain permission needs to be set. And then down the line, 3 months, 2 months down the line, you start to get red alerts, right? You start to get issues. So a service designer can actually anticipate that, can actually help you design that onboarding process, taking into account what needs to happen to avoid those issues down the line. So that's how we're working together. Again, UX research is about well-defined problems and usually within a tribe, within a product. That's how we want them to be working, like really, really close to product. Service design has a dual role. They help bridge products between a tribe. So for example, in our what we call front of house division, we have different tribes there who kind of work or deliver value for the same personas. So a service designer is overseeing the 3 tribes. So they make sure that whatever the operations tribe user needs is shared with the guest experience tribe, for example. But then the other way service designer brings value is with non-product related entities. So our support team, our deployment and onboarding team, our GTM team overall, our go-to-market team. So how can they bring value quasi as an in-house agency to specific challenges, which are quite relevant, quite important for the organization, right? As it is to onboard more and faster. So that's how they're working together with them.
And I think you mentioned the word silos, which is the word that you hear a lot, everywhere. Don't create silos, beware of silos, etc. But at the same time, you speak about the tribe work. And am I understanding correctly the role of a design system to really break the silos and to have one overarching library of how the system should look like?
That's the ideal outcome. Precisely.
And is it being implemented the way, let's go really personal.
Yeah.
Is it now being implemented the way you like it to be, or where are the challenges we face maybe?
I think we're on the right path. I think, again, it might sound very political, but I think what's been done in the last year was really good, was foundational. Was about, defining tokens, was about really defining certain components, ensuring that the different tribes adopt those components. But we've got work to do when it comes, for example, with documentation. So we've got quite a fragmented documentation currently. So in the day-to-day of designers, they hesitate. Where is it that they should be going to understand how to design something? Should they be going to our Supernova site? Should they be going to Confluence? Should they be going to Figma? They end up jumping from one side to the other, or even asking on Slack channels. We still have different libraries. We have, our core library, we have our B2B library, we have our GX library. That should all come under one. That should all come under a common library. Accessibility. Accessibility is one of those biggies, right? Especially this year, there's the EAA 28th of June deadline coming up really fast. So we need to make sure that whatever assets that the teams are using to build the experiences are accessible, are inclusive, are AA compliant. So there is, a natural maturing path that we need to follow. Now, to your point of does the design system allow that? That is the theory. Absolutely, that's what a design system should allow. Now, what the design system has focused on is atomic components. So the let's say as if it was a Lego brick, to make sure that the Lego bricks that one team and the other team use are the same. But how do you assemble those Lego bricks? It really hasn't been tackled. So how do side panels show up? What does the layout look like? What's the logic behind the banner? Things like that. So that's how the design system now needs to mature. Thinking about delivering value to the teams, not just with Lego bricks, but with instruction booklets. So if you want to deliver an experience, this is the instruction booklet that you need, and these are the pieces. Now you assemble them based on the value that you want to deliver using this kind of UI patterns.
Isn't design system, and now it's really a question from someone who doesn't understand it too much, isn't design system restrictive to creativity?
So what's creativity? Mm-hmm. Is it about crafting, or is it about solving the problem? If it's about solving the problem, well, there's no design system that solves a problem. The problem is about finding the logic, identifying how you need, what kind of functionality do you need? How does that link with other sources of information that you have within the house? How does it link to other sides of the product? That's our past has been quite siloed. The fact of working in tribes delivers value faster, but it makes you deliver value within a constraint, which is what you know, right? So that's where creativity should be happening, in how you solve the problem. Creativity in how you craft a UI is not our focus. Our focus should be on solving problems. Again, function and form. Form is a given, is your design system. Obviously, you're not going to be able to deliver 100% compliant or adoption of a design system, because you need certain customization, certain personalization. But can we achieve an 80-20? That's would be a nice kind of metric to get.
Was mews.design something that you researched before you joined? Yeah.
Oh yeah. It comes pretty high if you search for Mews. It comes up pretty high.
Good SEO.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a robust place. Again, you can tell that certain documentation is lacking there. You ask yourself questions like, why is the Figma library in a different state than the Storybook, for example? So it helped me, for example, when I was applying to the role, to get to understand the maturity of the system, but also into what's the logic of the team behind it, right? It's very functional, which I like. The fact of, we need to deliver teams who are crafting experiences the assets. Okay, but you're just delivering certain assets, again, components, not patterns. So it helped me understand as well, how could I be delivering value to the team?
And I want to insert a kudos in here, because I was approached by our former designer saying that they actually come to our design system still kind of for inspiration of how to solve things or how we have done things. So I think that's a nice testament to the work that everybody has done on the mews.design.
Definitely.
I have one kind of maybe funny question. Okay. Also, I was given this question, so let's see if you can answer this one. Could you describe design as a metaphor?
Ooh.
Have a sip for that.
As a metaphor. That's interesting. So I love the sea, right? I live in Madrid, so I miss it. We have a house down in the southeast of Spain, which we spend quite a bit of time there, usually like summer with kids' holidays, and then usually some time over Christmas, and then like a couple of trips throughout the year. But it's on the beach. It's like really in front of the sea. So I'm really in love with, you know, sea sports, just being on the beach. So those kind of things. So if I had to think about an analogy, probably have to do with something related to the sea or with a boat in this case, for example. So imagine, you know, you're on a boat, you want to get somewhere, you want to go from Alicante, southeast of Spain, you want to go to Ibiza, which are the islands on the Mediterranean coast. What route do you take? That's the PM's role, right? That's the kind of captain navigating, telling you this is the map, this is where we need to go. Okay, now you start getting there. There's waves. You need to, you know, go back and forth, left, right. You need to make sure you don't hit the bottom. That's a designer's kind of role, making sure you're crafting that day-to-day of a product, being the boat in this case. We talk about design, again, in a generic form, but what's the UX researcher's role there? There are rocks in the bottom of the sea, which you want to avoid. Maybe there's a dolphin suddenly that jumps and you want to avoid it again. So that's the UX researcher's kind of role, to anticipate problems and help you steer towards one direction or the other. Now, if you look beyond the sea, that's a service designer's role, looking beyond the product, right? So storms could come up, wind could come up. There's other boats around you. That's a service designer's role, to understand what happens around the product and how can they bring those insights into the product. And then obviously you need a boat that gets there fast, which is the engineering's kind of role. So I'd say that's the analogy.
Are you the captain or?
Not the captain. I'm probably the guy who's tooling up the boat and helping equip, putting some beers in the fridge. That's the role that I like having, yeah.
It's kind of the back office.
Yeah, I mean, I like making others succeed. That's my kind of motto. So that's what's also driven me to this role.
I feel like you took away my question about like what is your ultimate goal in your role, or, you know, what would you like to achieve? What is the, let's say, when you, I don't know, you know, footballers say hang up the boots on the you know, hanger when they finish their career. So what is it when Diego finishes his career in design? What is the legacy?
I mean, probably, you know, designers who have loved working where they've worked, because everything was easy, everything was smooth. They had a great relationship with PMs, great design system that helped them do their job. But then obviously that needs to turn into a product that's evolved super fast, that's been delivered at high speed into market, that's really nailed the needs of the users. So that's what I'd like to see happening. A team that performs, who highly performs, and who's super happy and super excited about working in that high performance mindset, but also who's nailing value and who's really bringing those dollars home.
So how can design help to bring the bright future to Mews?
So that's a good point, because we tend to work on yearly roadmaps, right? So we have very definite things we need to be achieving, because there are certain pains, because there are certain lacks in the product, because there are certain demands from our customers which we're not being able to meet. But it's true that long-term vision, which is you know, I did my new hires onboarding, what we call our NHO, a couple of months ago. So I was super excited when you had Richard, our founder, talking about the vision, the ecosystem around hospitality. That sounded like, you know, super ambitious. So how do we bridge that? How do we bridge our yearly or annual planning with that vision, right? So I think that's where design, and specifically service design, actually has a really strong impact. I'm trying to implement this model in which there are 3 levels, let's say, of research or of understanding what value you need to bring to market. So day-to-day, let's say usability, validation, that's PMs and designers need to be doing that, because that's the day-to-day, that's an input into their job. UX researchers, they work with well-defined problems. I need to bring value into an X environment, events, spaces, whatever it is, right? So they can help you understand what are the problematics there. Service designers, they need to be focusing on the blurry. They need to be focusing on what's the next stage of value. If we want to be moving into X area of the industry, if we want to become, not to say like specific things in our roadmap, but they need to be looking further than 1 year. And that's not so far away. That's really about understanding how your products could be working together, could be evolving, could be moving into different arenas, adjacencies within the industry, right? So I think that's a strong area where service design can have an impact.
Right. I think this is like a nice wrap of all the things to how can design help to bring the bright future. So Diego, thanks for coming over.
No worries, man. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks for everything. And thank you for tuning in. And little reminder, we are now on Spotify. So if you now watched us on YouTube, you can definitely go to Spotify and listen to us also without our faces next time. So thank you and see you next time, or hear you next time.
Cheers, everyone. Thanks.